Hello and welcome to the Internet of Things Made Simple. I'm Larry Humor. I do apologize for having a bit of a cold today. I'm going to try to make my way through it without sounding too bad. This is mini episode 17. Many thanks for joining us. As always, shout out to our new listeners. Welcome aboard. Check out our webpage, theinternetofThingsmadesimple.com, which has some incredible material on IoT, not just links to the podcast. And I humbly ask to subscribe to this podcast using your favorite podcast service. And I remind you, we're available on Apple, Google, Spotify, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and about 20 more, so take your pick. Today we're going to look at how IoT is changing the world of public safety. Now, people often use the term first responders in replace for public safety. Personally, I look at them a bit different. I see first responders as being a bit of a more narrow definition, being the ones who bravely do what most of us would never even consider. They don't run from a fire, a gunfight, or an explosion, but rather they run to it. And I usually categorize as the big three: police, ambulance, fire. While those categories of brave men and women certainly do fall under the overall category of public safety, I tend to think of that term as being a bit broader. I also see it referring to people who protect us at the border, in parks, at universities. I also add in those who protect us from disasters and keep key systems running, like frontline utility workers, structural engineers, and dispatchers who keep everyone organized. Finally, I also include hospital workers who treat the wounded after emergencies as part of this noble group. Regardless of how you choose to define the term public safety, this space has been longtime users of different IoT products. For decades, they use a combination of private voice and data networks, along with cellular and satellite networks, to get back valuable information that they needed to do their job safely. IoT, as I've said many times and will continue to, is all about information. It provides information that they're normally not privy to, at least not in real time. And this information allows them to better react to situations, take necessary precautions, and helps them better deploy their resources to do more with less. Over the course of this episode, I'm going to highlight 5 of the ways that IoT has helped public safety to date and how new advancements in data processing, higher data speeds, and software development will do more in the future. The last thing before I go into the list, both in the book and on previous podcasts, I have referenced a great movie, The Minority Report, on several occasions. You probably need to see this movie, as many of the concepts I've spoken about have a link to this movie. It points out the need to balance between information being acted on and our need to protect privacy, and to continue to presume that people are innocent until proven guilty. If you haven't seen it, watch the movie. You'll see what I mean. Okay, on to the list. The first on this list is something that was supposed to reduce some of the inherent bias in our system by taking emotion out of many decisions, but has in fact become controversial, and that's the use of artificial intelligence and data analytics in policing. The theory behind using these two products does make a lot of sense. Raw data is inputted into a system, and it's supposed to allow for unbiased decisions as to where to staff police officers, possible crime hotspots, and many more things. As an example, say that the data shows there is a spike in crime on days when 3 different variables occur. The temperature is over a certain level, say 20 Celsius or 68 Fahrenheit. You're within 500 yards or meters of a school, and it's within 90 minutes of the school being let out. This would inform police to provide more presence in those areas in that time period. The problem is that the data has not always been that clean. Studies have shown that human bias is making its way into the data, which tends to further increase discrimination towards certain groups of people, not lower it. To be clear, this is far from an issue with public safety-based AI. I've pointed out in previous podcasts, and you can see it in the news, about how Amazon's facial recognition systems have issues recognizing certain groups of people simply because the faces used to teach the system were overly represented by middle-aged white dudes like me. Now, this doesn't mean that there's not a tremendous amount of value to AI for policing. One great use of IoT combined with data analytics is the use of Audible Sensors to detect gunfire. Some areas have low rates of crimes being reported to the police. As well, depending on the amount of echo, it can often be difficult to differentiate for most people between a car backfiring and a gunshot. and this causes police to be dispatched unnecessarily. Audible sensors are used in many areas with known gun activity to detect and alert police to gunfire. They're also aware of the different frequencies that are produced by guns being fired and can even send out special alerts if high-powered or if an automatic weapon is used. Now, obviously, when you deploy sensors that can record audio, you bring up just a whackload of privacy issues. So far, they've been only able to monitor certain frequencies, and they've only been put in areas that are a certain distance away from people's homes and in the general public. We'll have to see where this goes. On to number 2. The second area is one that's definitely not new, and that's how IoT enhances the in-vehicle experience for workers. Seeing a laptop in a police cruiser or a fire truck is quite commonplace, but the extra speeds added with each new generation of cellular technology is adding more to a level of functionality all the time. Later in the podcast, we're going to talk about a new initiative from the US government that helps to ensure that during times of emergencies, public safety officials and workers are able to connect to the vital information they need. Using 4G today, and soon 5G, has turned vehicles into true mobile offices. Besides being able to download information like mugshots, blueprints, and medical reports in real time, the bandwidth allows for real-time video to be uploaded to provide more detail on a particular situation. Since much of the work in the field of public safety happens away from the vehicle, many advanced cellular gateways are now allowing a tremendous reach of Wi-Fi, offering high-speed connectivity up to several hundred yards away securely. This allows for ambulance workers to have connectivity at the patient side, as well as for a fire chief to see blueprints on a rugged tablet while inside of a building. Again, the idea of remote communications in the vehicle is not new, but the power brought by cellular data networks is making it better each passing year. The third point has to do with making sure the valuable frontline workers are safe and healthy, and that involves on-person biometric monitoring. Again, not totally new. Many of us have seen the yellow brick-like devices worn by firefighters to alert to the location and other variables, perhaps like heat levels. However, the combination of lower-cost sensors and local connectivity is extending this much further. For some, it might be in the form of a wearable. The wearable, more on the wrist perhaps, can report onboard telematics, the heart rate and GPS of a worker, and it can record activity level. If the worker becomes unconscious, the lack of movement could be reported in combination with their location. Others might choose to use a different form factor, like what's offered through smart clothing. Smart shirts are being used to record heart rate, blood pressure, and perspiration levels of key staff. When compared against a baseline for that worker, the chiefs and executives can see the nervousness level of the worker and can also tell if they may be coming down with a virus, both of which could put them and the public at risk. Finally, why not finish off point number 3 with a bit of controversy? The police-worn body camera. Just like most other inventions, it started out with a noble purpose. The camera would show the true representation of the officer's interactions. Who said what, how an incident escalated, and much more. There's been privacy issues and security issues to contend with, as well as the biggest issue, the cost of cameras. To date, some police forces, especially smaller ones, have started to either not deploy them or end deployments, so stay tuned to see where this goes. On to point number 4. As I hinted earlier, connectivity for public safety vehicles is only good if you're able to connect every time you need it. Imagine a wide-scale issue, so say a train derailment in a large metro area. How long before the cellular networks become jammed and getting a call or message through can become impossible? Even with the incredible capacity that will eventually be delivered by 5G, that's just too big of a risk not to be considered. Enter in Band 14, which is what powers a project called FirstNet. The cellular carriers, in conjunction with different U.S. government agencies, recognize this issue and have set aside a portion of the 700 MHz spectrum that is only used for different government officials. The benefit is that there's tons of capacity that's always ready, regardless of the situation. The network is in development, and it's either available or but to be deployed in all 50 U.S. states, and there's a number of devices that are able to transmit using these frequencies. The goal is to have over 95% of the U.S. population covered in the next few years. One question that I couldn't find the answer to, who exactly gets to use Band 14? I guess said another way, who is defined under the definition of first responders? It seems that most frontline first responder employees qualify, and that makes sense. I wonder who else could be on the list, though. Does a utility team that needs to correspond with officials to shut off key power and water qualify? How about the engineers who might need to respond to a fire or an earthquake? I couldn't find a definitive list on who's eligible now and who might be in the future. If you know, please send me a note, and I'd be glad to give you credit for it in the next podcast. The final one is related to Band 14, and that's how it helps to both prepare for and respond to a natural disaster. Now, I told the story in the book, but it bears repeating here. So I'm flying back from San Francisco to Calgary a few years ago, and I was busy with meetings, and other than hearing from my wife that it was raining hard, I didn't hear too much about Calgary on the news. I was sitting on the right side of the plane during the approach into the Calgary airport, and we could hear virtually everyone on the left side of the plane gasping. They were marveling at the swimming pool that was once known as downtown Calgary. The combination of a heavy spring snowfall in the mountains, about an hour drive away, an extremely heavy rain pour, and a storm that turned into the mountains, so basically the storm drained like a sponge for several days against the mountains, caused a bunch of water to come rushing down the rivers into Calgary and surrounding areas. How bad was it? Well, the town of High River, which is a little bit south of Calgary, had RCMP officers visiting homes in boats and canoes. And the Calgary Zoo and Saddle Dome were both under several feet of water. In fact, if you ever see the Calgary Flames play on TV, just make mental note of this. The people sitting in the first few rows, I believe it was 7th and 8th row were even included, would need to use scuba gear just to sit there during the flood. Despite this, Calgary-based authorities did a great job, I think. The loss of life was minimized, and those areas bounced back fairly quickly for the most part. Think of how IoT can help both during the incident and to prevent it. You can't prevent that much water from rushing into an area, but you can get better warning systems, and that uses sensors to allow for much early detection and, more importantly, very specific knowledge on where to deploy key assets like disaster recovery and evacuation crews before they are needed. As well, IoT-based communication, as we pointed out earlier, will help to provide better information about the whereabouts of key assets and staff at all times, making sure they're safe and productive. Finally, in many cases, people that need help aren't easily reachable. Maybe a bridge got destroyed or an area was flooded. Drones are used to deliver food, water, and medical supplies for those in need. As a final note to wrap up the podcast, we owe it to those who have chosen to risk their lives on a daily basis to give them the tools they need to do their job better and safer. This episode is proudly dedicated to those first responders who likely could have made more money and been home for more holidays and birthdays doing something else, but instead chose to dedicate their life to keeping us safe. Again, thanks for listening. As always, love to hear from you. Our Facebook page is a great place to start. The Internet of Things Made Simple. It has links to podcasts as well as other material. If I'm connected to you on LinkedIn, that's a good place to start as well. And if we're personally connected, drop me an email or a text. Thanks again. Talk soon. I'm Larry Bohumor. Take care.